I like to hand it over to Dr. Merkle. Dr. Merkle is president of New St. Andrews College. He also teaches a few classes and is a really great boss. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ben, and he's going to give a quick introduction, and then we'll break into Q&A about the college and really anything.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Grace. Fun to be with you all. So I'm going to give you a sort of brief summary of things about NSA that I think are unique, worth noting, and trying to kind of help orient you to Moscow, New St. Andrews, and basically the project that we're up to here. And you might be thinking about questions that you've got for me that you could give me towards the end, and I'll try to go 25 minutes or so, and then if you've got questions, you can start typing those in, and I'll do my best to answer them. So this is obviously a really bizarre way to introduce you to the school. For us, Prospective Student Weekend is when everybody comes to visit Moscow. You would stay with students and sit in on classes. You would have lots of social functions that you would go to over the weekend, and you'd spend a lot of time walking up and down Main Street, just out my window here, which is kind of basically our campus. Coffee shops and hamburger joints and all that up and down the street that basically our students spend most of their time hanging out somewhere on Main and walking back and forth to apartments that are a couple blocks in any direction. That's what we would normally introduce you to, but as you know, we're all pushed online for this moment, and it's been a really interesting transition for us to try to get all of our courses online. And then this idea, well, let's just go ahead and go for some online Prospective Student Weekends. And so it's great because we get to connect to you without you having to travel, which is a lot easier and I think saves you a lot of money. But it does sort of rob you of a little bit of what you would actually experience. And the reason why is I think NSA is such a unique school, and we're so very, very different. And it's really hard to convey what we're doing in any form other than an actual physical visit. And the reason is because I think we have in America kind of a mythological college experience that everybody thinks of college as being this one particular thing. And if you're not doing that, it's just really hard to explain to somebody what you're doing. And so if you tell somebody, I'm going to go to New St. Andrews College, it's a small little school in North Idaho. We just have 1 degree in liberal arts. You kind of just right there, it seems like you probably lost most people just with that. And to a certain extent, I don't mind that because I think it's good that we do a little bit of, we do want the kid who's wanting something different. We don't want the student who's like, I just want what everybody else is getting. We want somebody who's actually intrigued with the idea of doing something a little bit different and a little bit countercultural. So I think it's probably good that it is a little bit off-putting, but at the same time, I don't want to put off all the people who actually would be fantastic students here by not letting them see what's actually happening. So I want to walk through some of the things that are unique and peculiar about NSA and explain why it is that we're doing it, and try to give you a sense of why that would actually be to your advantage to pursue your college education in that way. One of the first ones is the way that we do offer the centerpiece of New St. Andrews is a Bachelor of Arts in Liberal Arts and Culture. And when you tell somebody I'm going to study, I'm going to get my undergrad degree in liberal arts, then that sounds to a lot of people like the sort of classic, would you like fries with that degree, right? It's the degree that if you go and you get that diploma, then you will only be certified for being a barista for life. And that's kind of your only option from there. Which, when people think that way, it really demonstrates how much America has shifted over the last 50 to 60 years, where we have completely reimagined what the purpose of your undergraduate degree is for. And I would say that in doing so, we've actually dramatically reduced and lowered our expectations for what the undergraduate degree is supposed to be. So think of it this way. So most people tend to think now of the purpose of college, particularly your undergraduate degree, is that it is supposed to give you the appropriate vocational certification to get you into the job that you want. And so that's why you'll notice over the last 50 to 60 years, if you were to go 80 years ago and look at the names of degrees, they had far more to do with intellectual disciplines, whereas now most names of degrees correspond to particular jobs. Okay, so the expectation now is that, and this is really weird when you say it as bluntly as this, but it just plain is what everybody thinks, and that is that the name of your degree needs to match the name of the job that you want to get, right? And so your degree is your passport into that particular career. Now, the funny thing is that if you actually ask your parents and go out in the workforce today and see how it actually works in the workforce, you'll discover that the name of your degree, the significance of the name of your degree fades very quickly. Your degree gets you the entrance into the workforce, but it does very little after that. And that if your sole, and not only that, the odds of your 18-year-old self being able to pick the career path for your 23-year-old self, your 35-year-old self, your 48-year-old self, on and on and on, the odds of you being able to pick your career path are pretty slim. My undergraduate degree was in chemistry. I am now the president of a liberal arts college. And if you talk to your parents or you talk to most people that are in their 30s and up, very rarely do we continue in the path that initial degree set us on. And what you find is that there are these particular vocational skills that are rather easy to impart. They are just the vocabulary, the formulas, the certain procedures that are associated with moving into a particular job. But they really don't take 4 years at college to learn them. They take your first 3 months on the job to learn those. But what happens is when you focus on those certification skills, you find that you actually are not doing a very good job of preparing people for the workforce, and you're radically lowering your expectations of what the education is supposed to impart. So come at it from a different angle. Instead of saying that your undergraduate degree is supposed to get you a job, what if your undergraduate degree is about disciplining your mind and learning and training and installing in you certain intellectual habits that take great rigor, great focus, great care to cultivate. And it has to do with the intellectual disciplines, the ability, first of all, to just work hard with your brain, to be able to think clearly, to be able to think creatively where you come at a problem constantly from a different angle, to be able to think logically where you constantly go back and subject yourself to the rigor of clarity of logical thinking, to be able to force yourself to make decisions again and again and again and cultivate that decision-making habit, and to be able to learn the skill of communication, both in both directions and in all forms. So in both directions, what I mean is the ability to hear, to listen, to read somebody else's words and actually hear what they're saying rather than confusing that with things that you were thinking about while you were listening to them, which is actually a remarkable skill for somebody to be able to make that distinction, and will get you far in life when you can actually set down what you're thinking and really truly hear what the other person is saying. To be able to then actually communicate yourself, to be able to speak and to be able to write with precision, with clarity, with a sensible logical flow. Those skills don't correspond to any one career path. But when you cultivate those skills early on, then whatever career path you enter, you find that you climb to the top. I was just speaking with some of our graduates who graduated 10, 12 years ago, and they were all talking about how it was so interesting to them the way the longer they were in their job, the more their New St. Andrews education came to be relevant. And the higher they climbed in leadership positions, the more they relied on their New St. Andrews training than on any particular technical training that they might have also gotten. The habits and skills of the liberal arts are those skills that I was just describing that sort of transcend any one particular vocational focus. In the workforce now, they refer to these as the soft skills. And you'll notice that when you if you survey like what are the things that LinkedIn job listings are hiring for, and you sort them all out, you'll find that the soft skills by far dominate ahead of everything else. And every now and then you'll have an occasional vocational certification, but it's the kind of thing that's actually quite easy to pick up. Can you use Excel? Do you know how to write in code? Those are the kinds of things that if you're an intelligent, quick learning, disciplined mind, you can pick those things up rather quickly. But those skills of communication, critical thinking, those sorts of things actually take great work to cultivate. And that was always been the purpose of the liberal arts education, is to cultivate those skills. So if you go back 1,000 years, the liberal arts education, actually, if you've got your a little bit of Latin in you, you can do the etymology here, where the liberal arts are the liber arts. They're the arts, the habits and skills of the liber, and the liber is the free man, as opposed to the hireling or the servant or the slave. So you've got one kind of labor, which is the quick, easy to learn vocational skill, the mechanical habits that you can learn fairly quickly, and those are the habits and the skills of the hireling. Then you've got the skills of the liber, the free man, and a very select group of people were given those, and those are the people that were expected to go on into positions of real leadership, usually law, medicine, and the church, as well as also education. Those tended to be the disciplines that required those liber skills. And the liberal arts over the years have always been what marked out a college education. And they were intended to set somebody aside for leadership. That's why if you join the military now, I went into the Marine Corps Reserves right out of high school. And when I went in as enlisted. And that meant I was the one who would run around and do whatever you said, and always have to snap to attention and say, sir, and salute if somebody with a shiny bar came in on their collar. But that man with the shiny bar, he's an officer, and the thing that distinguished the enlisted from the officer was always a college degree. You had to have a college degree if you want to be an officer, and that's for leadership as well. And that education traditionally was a liberal arts education. Now, over the last 50 to 60 years, there's been a really significant shift where, and I would say this is a deeper conversation, but I think it has to do with a lot with our walking away from the Christian faith. But we have gutted our colleges of the liberal arts and made all of them these vocationally oriented degrees. And it's funny because our conception of the liberal arts is that is the useless degree. It's the subject where there is no right answer. It's just a lot of people kind of smoking pot and saying whatever they feel, and nobody's right, nobody's wrong, and who's to judge. And that actually is probably a pretty true portrayal of a lot of the secular liberal arts educations. But historically, when you have Christ, the solid rock, the firm foundation at the base of your liberal arts education, then truth is not subjective. Truth is hard. It's there is right and there is wrong. And when you build a liberal arts education on that rock, you'll find that liberal arts education is one of the most intense and rigorous things that you can go through. Now you remove the rock, and yeah, the liberal arts become everything that I was just describing, and it loses all of its rigor. But when it's built on the rock, it's actually this really rigorous education. And I think if you were here last time, one statistic I want to throw at you, I'm repeating it again, but it's really interesting. If you go back to 1960 and ask, and there's, I can show you the survey. There's surveys with data that goes all the way back to the 1960s. I think it's 1961 is the earliest one I've seen, where they ask, they surveyed college students to see how many hours per week they spend on their college education. And the average workload in 1961 was 40 hours per week. You had to spend 40 hours a week, and that's class time, also studying, writing papers, everything you put into college. And that makes sense because 40 hours a week is what we consider to be a full-time job. So that makes sense. What's interesting is that from 1961 until now, that number has dropped every single year. So that from 2011 to 2015, that was the most recent data that I've seen. And the average college student spent 17 and a half hours per week on school. Now, here's the thing, 40 hours, 17 and a half, but you have to remember that includes their class time. So if you assume that they were going for the minimum of 12 hours of courses, 12 hours per week is the minimum full-time load. So that means if they were at 40 hours a week here and you subtract 12 out, then that's 28 hours of studying, all right? It took 28 hours of studying per week in order to be ready for those classes. That's what they were like. Over here, 17 and a half, you still have to subtract 12 out, which means that you have 5.5 hours per week. That the average student takes 5.5 hours of studying per week, as opposed to the 1960s when it was 28 hours per week. So you see how college is getting easier and easier and easier and easier. And it's that shift to a vocationally oriented certification rather than aiming for those deeper skills, those deeper habits. Okay. It's easy to teach somebody, here are the steps to perform this function. Okay. It's easy to impart that. And that's why it's something that you can give to the hireling. It's very difficult to say, read this paragraph, and I'm going to ask you some really critical thinking questions about it, and you need to be ready to answer me. That takes actual work and labor, and it's very difficult. 28 hours versus 5.5. What's also interesting is if you go back to 1960, 15% of those students, those college students, 15% of them got A's, only 15%. From 1960 until now, that number has climbed every single year. So that in 1998, the A became the most common grade given away in college, and now it's 45% of students get A's in college. It's a participation certificate. Okay, it just is, and that's what everybody is getting now. So if you think about it, 28 hours to 5.5. So your 1960s predecessor had to work more than 5 times as long studying than you do now. And yet the current student is 3 times more likely to get an A. That tells you what has been happening at college. And there are a number of forces at work to make that happen. We really kind of detest that cheapening of the education, and we want to give you something very different. And so all that to say, if you come to NSA, you're going to get a rigorous liberal arts education. Now, just to be completely blunt and honest and make sure you're totally forewarned, we regulate every year. We do a survey, a workload survey, to see how many hours a week our students are having to put in order to thrive at NSA. The time it takes to do the NSA workload is, we're in the 1960s numbers. This is a 40-hour-a-week job. It really is. You're going to learn how to work hard. You're going to learn how to work hard with your mind. And we're not going to give you one particular vocation. What we're going to do is we're going to give you the skills to go in any number of different directions. And that's where our alums go, in any different direction. I mean, I told you I was just speaking to some of our grads. I have a group that I meet with regularly. They're spread out all across the country. And I can tell you, one's a criminal attorney, one's a tax attorney, one's in Illinois, one's in Washington. One works with in the medical industry. He invents and crafts and fits prosthetic limbs, and so he's got this crazy he was featured and given some awards because he was coming up with new ways to do prosthetic limbs for wounded warrior folks coming back from Iraq. Let's see, one is runs a large property management firm in Texas. Another is the CFO of a massive investment firm in New York and manages $250 million portfolio of things. And one is a filmmaker in Nashville, creates documentaries. And it's just a random group where I can just grab a group of alums and show all the different ways that you can, different places that you can go with a new St. Andrews degree. So we're not going to set you in one particular career. We're going to give you the ability to go into any number of different careers and climb and succeed into leadership positions from those careers. That's what we're doing. And you'll notice one of the questions that, if you're thinking about college right now, one of the questions that you in particular are going to be faced with is that right now all the colleges are having this massive identity crisis, because every college across the US in the course of about 24 hours had to pivot and go online. We all had to do it. Out of nowhere, all of a sudden we're like, we've got to figure out how to give this education online, which is just feels ridiculous. You know, like you for 25 years, you've lectured to this class, you've had all these in-person meetings, and then somebody tells you all of a sudden, now you have to figure out how to do it all online. And I think that we've actually done a pretty great job. I've been encouraged to see the innovation in our faculty. Dr. Stokes was telling me about how It's forced him to work more with his iPad where he's drawing on it. And he said there are elements of this that I would actually like to bring back into my regular classes when I have the students in class. Or Mr. Griffith, our Latin teacher, was telling me how he's figured out how to do these Google Docs where all the students' papers come up in tiles on the screen. And so he's doing translation exercises with them, and they're all typing, and he can see their assignment on his screen, and they can change their screen to different colors when they want to raise their hand, and he can look in at what they're doing. So it's fun to see that kind of innovation that's happening, and I do think that that's something that we're good at. But universally, everybody will say, but it's still, it's not the same thing, and it's really a downgrade in what we're doing. I have 3 of my kids are actually currently NSA students, and I've been asking them, how do you feel about it? And they would say basically, because they've already spent 3 years, 2 years, 1 year with their class and with their instructors, to shift to 2 months of online with those same people, they're able to get the same, they're able to do fairly well. But if this was it, it would be a pale shadow of the NSA education that they've been getting. But what you're going to find is, for most colleges, they're going to have to concede that the online version of their education is basically the same as their in-person one. And you're going to find a lot of schools having to kind of defend themselves, like, well, why is it that we're paying so much for an education that is so easy to just turn to something you just click on and listen to a 7-minute YouTube something, and then click on a few things and you're done? Because they're currently giving an education that takes 5.5 hours per week of studying in order to be ready for it. Whereas we're giving the kind of education that takes 28 hours of studying in order to be ready for it. And it's very different to have a quick quiz that you're clicking through and getting your certificate versus having an actual grueling examination with a live faculty member. We really prioritize the in-person stuff. We know a lot of our finals we'll do as one-on-one live finals. So you'll go for the year, and then you're going to go in by yourself and stand before your instructor, and he's going to lay into you. He is, and he's going to ask you kinds of questions that reveal all of your weaknesses. And it can be a difficult time. It can be kind of rattling. It can be emotional for some people because it's a very rigorous time. But when you come out from that, when you come out from 4 years of doing that every week, getting up in front of a class of 50 people every single week to argue your position, going to recitations every week where you have to argue with your classmates, with an instructor, and going into an oral final where it's just you again and again and again, at the end of 4 years, that changes you into a different kind of person. It really makes you into the kind of person who's able to get up and lead in any number of different directions. And you just don't get that from the online clickable version of a college degree, which is what even the in-person version of a lot of colleges are offering right now. So that's why we feel like this is just so important to give the kind of education we're giving, and particularly as Christians who see, we're really bewildered at seeing the way that the church has lost its voice in the world that we live in. And I think a lot of that is because the church has lost its education. We don't train people who are bold and ready to stand up front and lead from a Christian worldview. And that's what we want to give you, to create real leaders for the church over the next 100 years. That's our goal. A couple of other things that I want to just point out that are really different about New St. Andrews, and some of this you can get online, some of it you really have to be here in person to really get. One thing is to just note the financial philosophy of New St. Andrews. This is another really interesting moment because as a college president, my inbox, my email is kind of flooded right now with communication from different education associations who are all itemizing for me all of the money that we could be getting from the federal government. And so in one sense, this is right now a crisis for higher ed. But if you were to go behind the scenes, you would find that this is like absolute cash cow. You would not believe the kind of money that is just being thrown at all the colleges. You know that we're looking at a $2 trillion package that's coming through right now to help everybody out. Colleges have people in DC right now, and I'm getting emails from these people that are in DC who are spending all of their time in senators' offices, meeting with Secretary DeVos, and trying to carve out as much cash as they possibly can for colleges. I'm getting all these emails about the senators that I should be writing and telling them how rough it is for them and how, or for us, and how much money they need to give us. There's so much money coming from the federal government. And the thing is and this is the sad truth, is that money is going to have strings. And higher education is, you've got your public state schools that are funded through the state budget. About half their budget is coming from their state budget. The other half is the tuition, but that tuition, if you look inside of it, is Pell Grants, federally subsidized student loans, and then a little bit of it is the money from mom and dad. By far, if you were to look at your typical state university, the tuition money from mom and dad is the smallest slice of that pie. And then if you go over to your private schools, you'll discover again that it's actually, even though we say it's private, it's actually heavily subsidized by federal money. First of all, just a quick side note, if you all are looking at other colleges, if you're looking at another private college, another private Christian liberal arts college, something like that, you will notice that they're going to have a tuition price that could be anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 or $60,000. Probably the average one is in the mid to upper 30,000. Let's say $37,000. Okay, just so you know, and this is important for you to make sure you're not taken advantage of. You're going to go there, the tuition is $37,000. You're going to say, wow, I would love to go to this school. It seems like it would be such a great experience, but there's no way I could afford $37,000 a year just in tuition. But they're going to tell you, well, apply and then just see if you get a scholarship. Okay. Well, you'll do that. And here's the thing. I can promise you, you will get at least a $20,000 scholarship. You'll get at least $20,000, usually 60%, something like that. You'll get in scholarship. And then you'll think, oh, wait a minute, this is possible. I could do this because if I max out my student loans, I get my Pell Grant, and mom and dad come in and help a little bit, we would be spread so thin, but we could do it. And the thing is they're giving me a $20,000 scholarship. So it seems like a once in a lifetime opportunity. How amazing. You need to understand the price was never $37,000. It was always $17,000. That $20,000 scholarship is a gimmick that most of the colleges use. It's called discounting. So there's a sticker price, like, you know, when you go and you see the sticker price on your sweater and it's slashed down today, 60% off. And if you've been, shopping much, that sweater has never actually sold at that full price. It's always sold at the slash down price. It's always a half off sale. It's always a bargain basement, whatever. That $20,000 scholarship doesn't exist. There's not a bank account with $20,000 in it that they are saying this great applicant is worthy of this 20 and they're giving it to you and funding you with it. The $20,000 doesn't exist. They're just slashing their price. It's called discounting. So you need to understand that that's happening. So now we're looking at that $17,000 price, and your Pell Grant, your student loan, those are taking the bulk of the tuition. So the government money is, again, the biggest player, even in your private Christian schools. They're the ones that are actually funding it. And the fact that the federal government has their hands on all those things also means the federal government has influence on all of those things. Those are the strings that are attached. So definition of marriage, definition of gender, who can go in the girls' locker room, who can, all of those questions are going to be answered by the federal government, not by your Christian principles. And you need to be able to see that is coming. So it's interesting. I heard from one college president of a highly revered private Christian college, and she was describing how they had a problem with sexual assault on their campus. Well, because sexual assault is considered a form of gender discrimination, that makes it federal policy. Because of their financial aid, federal policy dictates how they must respond to it. And so their response to it was to sink millions of dollars into a multi-year re-education program for all their students about how to have consensual sex. And so you got a private Christian school that's having all these programs about how to have consensual sex. And they have to, because they take the federal money. But that's not the way Christians respond to sexual assault. We have actually a very different answer to that problem. But you get connected to that federal money, you lose your ability to stay principled in those things. all that to say, NSA, we don't take any federal money, no student loans, no Pell Grants. We try to keep our cost as affordable as we possibly can. So typical college, $37,000. Ours will be 13 and some change. Okay, so we really work on keeping it as affordable as possible. And we want to work with you and figure out how to make it possible for you to come to NSA. We want to be affordable. We're not trying our prestige and our well, basically the prestige of the school is in the curriculum, not in the tuition price. That's where we want to give you a really rigorous education, and we're not putting it in the tuition price, we're putting it in the actual classroom. And the thing is, when you focus on the classroom itself and not all the other amenities, you find that you can actually give a really, really rigorous education and a really impressive education. And so that's what we're really focusing on doing. Last thing, I'll just comment briefly on, I just talked about all the other amenities. If you come here, you will find that New St. Andrews is a college where you go to have classes. We don't have a climbing wall. We don't have the college, university, lazy river pool aquatic center. We don't have the school's football team, stadium. We don't have a cafeteria. We don't have dorms. We don't have any of those things. And the thing is those are more and more often considered to be the quintessential college experience, because college is about the social life and not the education. We're just going to be about an education. That's what we're going to give you. And so if you come here, you'll find that it's really, in one sense, very limited, or at least it feels that way. However, and we do that because it gives you the price point that makes this a reasonable education for you to get and not graduate enslaved by student loans. Typical student right now is graduated with up to $40,000 in debt in student loans. Our graduates have no student loan debt because we don't take student loans. So we work to keep this affordable, and we do that by focusing just on the classroom. A lot of the universities, they build these massive facilities, but it's not about the education. They're basically, if you think about it, they're really just recruitment tricks. So when you come and visit a school, you're going to spend a lot of your time visiting the aquatic center, the stadium, and not spend hardly any time in the classroom, because that's what you're paying for. You're paying for these other things, which are really just recruitment gimmicks. Okay, we strip all that away. We're just going to give you the classroom. Now, that said, that doesn't mean, and it's easy to make this conclusion, that doesn't mean though that all you can do is just go to class and there's nothing else happening. It's actually like really intense and lively community here with just so much always going on. But it's the organic and natural product of people living in a town that love each other, love God, and are full of energy. All right. And when you have a bunch of college students like that, you can't help but have this just really vibrant social life. But it's not the college's job. It's not the college that's doing it. It's just the natural overflow of this kind of life. So students all live, like I said, within a couple blocks of me from here, and usually most of them within walking distance. Now, Moscow is a university town. We're in North Idaho. It's a little town, 25,000 people, but we have 10,000 University of Idaho. Oh, sorry. Just a moment. I don't know how to make this go away. My wife. Anyhow, just a second. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. So anyhow, so we have the University of Idaho here, 10,000 college students. We have Washington State University about 5 miles west of us, just across the border here, with another 20,000 WSU students, Washington State University. So it means small town overflowing with college students. So this, in one sense, is your quintessential college town. That's why downtown is lots of coffee shops. If you come here Friday, Saturday night, there are bands playing gigs all up and down the street. Apartments are really easy to get because that's kind of one of the main industries of Moscow is student housing, which is all around. It is made for college students, and you are surrounded by college students. I know that if you're looking at us from Florida or Texas, as I see some of you are, and you're thinking like, okay, so I'm going to come in this plane to like the middle of North Idaho. You know, like I'll probably have to parachute out. There'll be potato fields all around, and at night it'll just be the lowing of the cattle and me doing Latin, you know, by myself. I just want to promise you that that's not in any way what it's like. It is. We are in the mountains. It's rural. If you like to ski, we've got great skiing. Just a couple-hour drive from here. $100 for a ski pass for the entire season at some great resorts not far from here. So there are great mountains, rivers if you're into the outdoors. But the town itself is actually much more cosmopolitan than that. It's a lot of university students from all over, and it really is very rowdy. Um, we have a couple phenomenal churches in the area, and we really expect students to get involved in a local church, to be discipled there and mentored there, to be worshiping regularly in one of the churches. We don't say which one you have to go to or something like that, but we do want you plugged in with one of the local evangelical churches. Um, but we expect that to be something that you enter into as an adult by yourself. So we don't have a dorm. We want you to get an apartment. We don't have a cafeteria. We want you to cook for yourself, figure out how to grocery shop, take care of yourself, learn to pay your bills, learn to figure out how to get your own internet, learn to wash your own clothes. And we want you to plug into a real church where you're worshiping with saints who are in their 80s and saints who are 6 months old, and not in just a little student group where everybody is only a year or two older or younger than you. We want you to be involved in real life. And the expectation that we have, that we put on you to be an adult, to be responsible for yourself, I think gives our students that sort of steep on-ramp to adulthood that a lot of colleges are robbing their students of. We're not going to baby you. We expect you to be an adult, and that's why our students, when they graduate, walk out of here as adults. They get married, they start families, they join churches, they get jobs. We don't see our graduates struggle to find a job. I think we have basically 100% job placement rate, because our graduates, when you graduate, what do? You go and you get to work, because that's what we've been training you to do. I think I've rambled on more than long enough. So let me see if there's any questions that I might have left you with. I hope that gives you a little bit of a peek into what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing. But any questions I might be able to answer for you?
We have a couple questions that have come through on the Q&A tab here. I'll just go ahead and read the first one. Do we have hard statistics on job placement percentage, long-term earning potential related to liberal arts degrees or NSA in particular?
Well, I know we have a 100% job placement rate. As far as I'm not seeing a graduate and not be able to get work. I think the exception would be um, when a student graduates already married and is now having kids and is going to be a homemaker or something like that. But other than that, we have a 100% job placement rate. Um, I would say I do have statistics, but I don't have them at the tip of my fingers here on earning potential over time. I've seen it, and I know that our grads do very well. And I've seen, if you do look at liberal arts data on the liberal arts education, you will notice that what they're finding is that the liberal arts degree, if you get a liberal arts degree, here's what will most likely happen. Your first job, you're going to enter lower than your friends who did a professional degree at the university. You're going to enter probably at a lower pay scale on average. Some of you won't, but on average. But what you'll notice is that the liberal arts degree climb is much steeper, and after 10 years, the liberal arts student has generally outpaced their friend. And so what's interesting, there's a company across the street here, Economic Modeling Specialists Incorporated, EMSI. At MC, they process the data that has to do with the performance of a college degree in the workforce and the intersection between the two. Incidentally, probably about a third of the MC guys are NSA graduates, and it's a really interesting example of the way the NSA diploma works. So the head of their computer engineering department is an NSA grad with no computer engineering degree, but what he has is the skills that he learned here that he applied to computers. And now they hire NSA students to write code, to do sales, to do economic data, all sorts of different things. But because you got a bunch of liberal arts people processing their data, they're coming at it from a different angle, and you're getting really surprising results, because what you find is your preconceived notions about the way the data is going to work tends to direct how you crank the data. And when you get people to come in with a more imaginative way of thinking, then all of a sudden more interesting trends are revealed. So they can trace a diploma as it leaves the college and goes into the workforce. And they'll show how these degrees all go to this job, and these degrees all go to this job, and these degrees all go to this job. But what they did was they said, well, let's keep going though, and let's see what that degree does for its second and third job. And because everybody just looks at that first step and they don't look at where the diploma goes after that. And what they noticed was that when you look at the second job, not the first job, if you take a liberal arts degree and you look at their second job, and you go from their second job and their third job, that all of a sudden there's this massive transition that happens, and that the number one category for people with liberal arts degrees in their second and third job, it all shifts to leadership. It all shifts to management. So they start to move into managerial roles. And so it's really interesting showing how that liberal arts degree tends to push people into the leadership management positions. They enter lower and then they climb faster.
Awesome. And kind of related to that, what are the kinds of jobs that NSA students go into right after college?
Yeah, gosh, it's all over the map. It really is. It really is crazy. So I'll give you a few, just sort of just a general breakdown. But man, it's just all over. Like, you really aren't limited if you come out with an NSA degree. You've got potential to go any number of different directions. Some common ones though, you can if you do NSA, you can move on to a second master's in a professional degree and do very well. So I think NSA is a fantastic foundation if you're interested in going into law. You go do NSA and then law school, and we've seen a number of our grads do well there. We're now seeing students be able to go from NSA into medicine. We've got one graduate who did NSA, then he did a 1-year post-bac certificate, and then on to med school. He's just about done with med school, and I'm starting to see more and more students take that medical route. We are working with the University of Idaho to put together what's called a 3-2 program. You do 3 years at NSA, 2 years at University of Idaho, and you walk out with a BA in liberal arts and a BS in mechanical engineering. So we're working on putting that together, and I'm hopeful in the next year or two that should be online. You can do NSA and then an MBA, Master's in Business, which allows you to move into finance. So I mentioned our friend that is on the East Coast is a CFO. He did NSA, then an MBA at Notre Dame, and then went into finance. We got another that did NSA, then MBA at Vanderbilt. He's now a VP at Goldman Sachs down in Texas. So I've seen a number of guys do NSA and then an MBA and into finance or business administration in one way or another. That seems to work really well. I've seen, now I'll tell you, if you are interested in going to be a teacher, like at a classical Christian school, I get more requests for NSA graduates to be teachers or administrators at classical Christian schools than I have students. So we're constantly looked to for that. I'll say though, most of our grads are not interested in it and prefer going into more professional stuff. So if you're interested in education, I can pretty much guarantee you those jobs, and pretty much anywhere in the country, because they come from all over the place. But that's not really what most of our students do. I think NSA is a fantastic foundation if you're interested in going into ministry, to do NSA and then seminary, because you'll graduate with a nice comprehensive liberal arts degree and conception of philosophy, literature, and all of that, combined with a really strong theology track and biblical languages, which puts you way ahead if you want to go into seminary. So I think it does really well there. The place where I love to see the degree at work are in the more entrepreneurial, creative kinds of positions. So see a number of NSA students go from NSA into entrepreneurial business, starting up crazy projects we have one grad who came from NSA and went and launched this company where they figured out how, if you go to a drive-through for food, And if the employee is stealing from the company, which apparently is pretty common, there are certain ways that they tend to structure their transactions such that they can sneak some money out and steal from the company. He figured it out, created all these algorithms and some cameras and some data and whatnot, and put together this whole service where if a company subscribes to his service, then when an employee basically structures the transaction a certain way, the camera sees it, records it, it's reviewed, and if the employee is stealing, the employee is reported. So you can save apparently massive amounts of money when you eliminate all the employee theft. Anyhow, that's all just to say it was a crazy entrepreneurial kind of invention. And I see a number of students coming up with that sort of thing, starting businesses up and down Main Street. There are multiple restaurants and other companies that are just started by the school, a hamburger joint, a publishing company, all these different companies that have been started by graduates, but in a much more entrepreneurial sense. There are things where it's like there's not a college degree for that. You just have to be an imaginative person. And then another one that I think that our grads are doing really well at are in the arts. So both writing, we're seeing a real trajectory of a number of our students moving into writing and being quite successful in writing. You probably know MD Wilson, who's now one of our faculty members, has been very successful in writing, but then that has pivoted now to where we're seeing a whole bunch of them working and being quite successful in filmmaking. I mentioned one of our grads in Nashville doing documentaries. Well, I'm seeing grads everywhere moving into filmmaking, and we've got, you might have seen, Nate, Andy Wilson, you might have seen Hello Ninja is on Netflix right now. It was the most binge-watched Netflix show a month or two ago. It's an animated cartoon series for little kids that was conceived of, written, and animated by NSA students just down the street. They're working on multiple other fairly significant film projects right now. It's a bunch of NSA grads that are making film, writing film, flying to LA back and forth once a week, putting together some significant projects. And I think that that's a really great example of the kind of thing that the NSA degree does really well. Let's see. Oh, question about law there. What law programs NSA grads commonly gone to after graduation? It's an exaggeration to say commonly gone to, just because we're so small that like everyone I tell you, I'm thinking of a particular person. It's not like 25 have done this and 17 have done this. I can think of individual people and what they've done, but I've seen them go on to law at one just finished law at University of Chicago, which is a very competitive program. I know we did have one go on to Harvard Law, Stanford. No, that wasn't law though. But there was one from Notre Dame. I think we have, if you know, Liberty University has a law program, which is really interesting just because that's the one place where you can go to study law with an entirely Christian faculty who's trying to give you a Christian approach to law. Liberty really wants students from here to go to their law school. They actually sent one of their profs here this last year to recruit NSA students. If you're interested in Liberty Law, I can make that connection really easily, and it comes with some scholarship money as well. But you could go to Liberty, there was one in Washington that I believe a couple of our students have gone to that was pretty good. But they're kind of all over the map. University of Idaho has a law school right here, and our students have done very well with that as well. A number of them have done that. Muted, yeah.
I was muted, yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. And thanks for coming, visitors. I don't know how many of you are in the 9 a.m. class right after this, so I might see some of you there. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us over email or text.